The following feature presentation is part of the Skywalking Network.
Power on.
It's showtime.
Boldly go where no one has gone before.
Warp 1, engage!
Welcome to a journey through time, space, and pop culture. A journey through a career in the special effects industry. Welcome to the Max Effects Podcast. In this podcast, we talk to Max Cervantes, who has worked in the special effects industry since 1985. He's worked on many of your favorite TV shows and movies, like Star Trek, Starship Troopers, and Beetlejuice. I'm your host, Kevin Toft. I'm here with Max, and this is episode 6. On this episode, we're going to talk about Max's beginning of his career in Star Trek. Now, he did do physical hand props, special props for the show, but he began as a background actor, as a Starfleet engineer, and he was visible on many episodes, and we're going to talk about that today. But first, we have to talk about Max's friend, Richard Arnold. Max, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Well, Richard Arnold was a very good friend of mine. I'd known Richard for a very long time. Richard started off in fandom as having been the president of the Gracie Lee Whitney fan club, Gracie Lee Whitney having played Janice Rand in the original series. And from there, Richard eventually became Mr. Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek's creator, his personal assistant, and sort of the show's archivist, in that he would pre-read scripts for Next Generation and would then be able to point out things that should be avoided or changed slightly if anything should contradict or go against something that had already been done or said on the original series and one of the original series cast movies. And unfortunately, we lost Richard just this last week from cancer. Richard had been diagnosed with cancer about 3 years ago, and he'd been doing okay. And then about a year and a half ago, Richard had decided to move back east to the Midwest to go be with his family. And so about the last time I got to see Richard was at the last big Star Trek convention in Las Vegas. And of course, there wasn't any convention this year with the COVID pandemic going on. And so it's very sad that we had lost Richard, you know, and Richard was a very old, dear friend of mine.
So sorry to hear that.
If it hadn't been for Richard, you know, I would have never have gotten into becoming an extra on Next Generation. And pretty much how that happened is that at the time I was working for Landmark Entertainment. I was one of their senior model makers, and we'd been doing many different projects, designing theme park facilities for Sanrio, for Universal Studios,
yes.
And for the fledgling Star Trek experience, which was still in the planning stages. And I ended up being between jobs because they closed down the projects that we were working on because they were ended. I ran into Richard at a convention, and he asked me what I was up to, and I told him that I was between jobs. And he said, well, if you're willing to do it and go through the hoops, I might be able to get you on Next Generation as a background extra, a background actor. He said, but there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through.
Sign me up.
He said, I can't just say, yeah. And so I asked him, well, what would I have to do? He said, well, number one, you're going to have to go to Central Casting and get yourself registered. You have to pay a small fee, and it's mostly to cover the paperwork, you know, and take pictures of you. And after that, then, you know, you'll have to go basically sort of not really a screen test because they don't film you, but they want to see you in person at both Central Casting. And then after that, then at Paramount. And then I had to go to Paramount to be looked over.
Right. And I understand all the reasons they want to see where they're going to plug you in as an extra, what you look good. And at that time, you looked extremely Starfleet, my friend.
Well, I was cursed and blessed at the same time with some people have called a baby face.
Right.
I've always looked much younger than my real age. At the time of when I filmed Next Generation, I think I was like 33. And I've had a lot of people tell me I look much, much younger than 33. It used to be my curse because being a young man and wanting to go out to the bars and clubs, and I was constantly getting, carded. Even up to when I was even 28, I was getting carded. And so I got tired of that. So I grew a mustache and goatee to look older, and it worked. But of course, for Next Generation, they didn't want anybody, as far as extras, to have facial hair because it makes you stand out, and they don't really want you to stand out.
Will's got that taken care of.
Yeah. And well, they just don't want people to stand out. They want, as a background extra actor, they want you to just blend in.
Right.
You're just there to be.
They don't want you upstage in Riker.
Scenery to, yeah. They just want you to be there to be living scenery, to fill out and make the place look lived in, but they don't want you to stand out too much.
I had the opposite problem with that.
I went ahead and I shaved.
I had the opposite problem of that, Max, because being a giant, they assumed I was 21. When at an early age, they said either that or you're a child with a thyroid problem. But so they just thought I got assumed at an early age to be older than I was just by my sheer height. They couldn't.
I would always assume. I remember other friends of mine who were really tall, like you, always telling me that people will then assume, well, you must play basketball. Look how tall you are.
That's why I always ask them, do you play miniature golf?
So I had to go to Central Casting in Burbank and to be seen. And then they would photograph me, and then there was paperwork to be filled out. And after that, then the one thing that Richard was able to do for me is that he was able to put in a word at Paramount saying, hey, do we need any extras that fit this sort of category?
Right.
And that I'm Latino and that I've got dark hair and blah, 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 and all these sort of things. And they're like, well, we're willing to see him. We're not going to say yes, but we're willing to see him. And so I got to then go to Paramount and to be seen.
But to be honest, your look at that time, you could have been Latino, you could have played Native American, you could have played Pacific Islander, depending on which way they wanted to push you. I think you could cover a lot of stuff with your look at that time.
Right. And so I went and met with the people at Paramount, and it's not that big of a deal. They just look at you. They literally want to watch you walk, and they themselves then took pictures of me so that they can show it to their uppers.
Sure.
And then the final task was, do you fit in anything they already have? Because, extras are replaceable easily.
Right.
So if they don't have something that fits you,
SOL.
That's the final hurdle to jump through. And they actually did find something that fit me, because I have pretty broad shoulders. I wasn't as big as I later got with bodybuilding.
It's before you started pumping up.
Yeah, I was still, fairly decent sized in shape, but I wasn't as big as I got later. But they finally found something that fit me, but it was originally made for a guy who was 6'3". And so what they did is they took up the pant legs. Yeah, they took up the pant legs and they took up the sleeves. What doesn't show up in the costumes, though, on Next Generation is that in the first season and the second season, before they changed the uniforms, in the pant leg at the base, where the front of the pant leg goes over the boot, there's a V-shaped notch in the pant leg. And there's an elastic strap that goes underneath the boot, which is attached to the cuff of the pant. Well, in the first two seasons, there is a colored stripe right there matching the rest of the divisional color you might be wearing. They got rid of that in the third season because they changed the uniforms.
Right. And
so what they did is they're not going to completely recut the pant leg. So what they did is they literally took the extra fabric to make the pant leg shorter to fit me through the middle of the calf. So on my pant uniform, there was a very fine little black line running around, each of my calves, which is where they folded the fabric and hand stitched it to take up the extra fabric. So you'd never notice that on camera because it's black on black. Yeah. And then they just took up the shirt sleeves a bit, and then it fit me fine. And that was the final hurdle.
Now wait a minute.
To them saying yes.
Is there any? I can't remember which guild it is. It's not SAG. Is it AFTRA? Is there any guild stuff that happens when you become an extra?
Not necessarily, because back then they had negotiated with SAG, the Extras Guild, in that even though Star Trek is a union show, they were allowed to have X amount of non-union background actors.
As long as you don't have a line, right?
Exactly. As long as we didn't have dialogue. Because then if they gave you dialogue, they would have to Taft-Hartley you into the union.
Yeah.
And Taft-Hartley is an old rule from, I believe, like the 30s, that if an extra, a background actor, is given dialogue, they enact the Taft-Hartley rule to then expedite getting that person into the union, which means they have to pay all the union dues, and then they're allowed to do their dialogue, but then they have to pay all their union dues, and they become in the union. It's an easy way to get into the union, but it's not an easy thing to have done. Anyways, that was immaterial because I was never going to get dialogue. And so then I had to wait and hear back whether or not they wanted to use me and hire me.
How long was that?
And I've eventually, not too long, about maybe 3 or 4 days, maybe at the most.
I thought you were going to say weeks.
And no. TV moves way too fast. They can't wait for that.
Did they have you sign a non-disclosure agreement when you went in for all your paperwork?
Well, it's funny. There wasn't any social media back then. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter, no Instagram, no nothing. And it was just sort of generally understood. You don't take pictures, and you certainly don't give them away or any of that sort of thing. So we never were asked to sign NDAs. I'm certain like the main actors and such did, because of course there was, the newspapers and radio and such, but I don't remember ever having to sign any sort of NDA as an extra. And again, there were signs on the soundstage doors saying, no unauthorized photography allowed. And yeah, although I did take pictures of myself, nobody even to now has ever seen those pictures, right, except for my immediate family members. So it's just understood, no flashy, no talky, no nothing. And even now,
you can tell from watching interviews with people that they're under some sort of an agreement not to tell.
Yeah. Yep. And so you just don't talk about it. We, even now, when I work on a project, the rule of thumb, the golden rule sort of is like, you don't talk about it and you don't show pictures from it until after it airs. And that's it.
Right.
So I got the yes, and then I got the call of what day to be there. And, I already had friends of mine besides Richard Arnold working on the show behind the scenes. I was friends with Mike and Denise Akuta. Mike was in charge of the graphics,
yes,
and Denise, his wife, eventually came onto the show later, and she was experienced with doing like the video playback for the consoles and such. As I was friends with Rick Sternbach, who's one of the senior illustrator designers for the show, as well as I was friends with John Eves, who was also a production illustrator, who I had known from as well from other stuff. And Mike and Rick both gave me a really good piece of advice once I let them know that I had gotten the okay and that they wanted me to come work on the show as an extra. And they basically told me, don't let the production know that you're a fan.
Oh.
And I always thought, well, what? That seems kind of weird. It's like, yeah, I know. And they shrugged their shoulders about it. And they said they had a really bad run-in with a fan during the production of the first season of Next Generation, where this small group of like 3 hardcore fans broke into the studio, hid on the lot somehow. And then when everybody was gone, they had hidden themselves on one of the sound stages where they filmed Trek. And they then went on their own little private tour. And they had even were so bold is that they had themselves an old-fashioned VHS camcorder with them. And they recorded themselves walking around on the sets and doing this and that. And I think they even stole some stuff that they've said.
Well, see, you know from current events, the police really appreciate it when you film your felonies for them.
Right?
Yes.
And 2 of the people ran off, and the third one then pretended to be having a heart attack. And in this melee, that's how the other 2 ran off. And, you know, they dropped the camcorder and skedaddled. And, well, of course, that videotape did them in. But because of that
I would have said,
incident.
Shatner sent me.
But, you know, that really put the production on edge.
Right. No more fans.
About fans.
Yeah.
And, you know, so they, you know, my friends basically just told me, don't let them know you're a fan.
Okay, pro tip.
And
keep that a secret.
Well, and that's so weird though, because so many other people on the production, like, you know, my other friends I mentioned, were fans, and partly that's why they were hired, because they knew the subject matter and were so, you know, intense about wanting to make everything as best as they could.
They're just a little higher up the food chain. If you're that low, you can...
Well, exactly. They're not low-hanging meat like a background actor like
you've got
me.
your date. You know when you're going to have to go there. Do they give you a checklist of things you have to do before you go? Or what? Like, obviously you go to Paramount, right? They're on Melrose, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, we were told like certain things like, don't dye your hair. Don't change your look. Don't do anything to change your look from the last time we saw you,
right.
Which included don't suddenly decide to grow facial hair back, you know, and all those sorts of
come
things.
in clean shaved, but as far as cutting your hair, they'll trim it and style it the way they want. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah, sort of mostly. I went to wardrobe. I picked up my uniform, and that was another interesting thing you had to do. You had to sign in and out every day your communicator badge you would wear on your uniform. And that was because people would keep them.
Duh.
And people were using them as currency and selling them on the lot.
This is why we can't have nice things, people.
Exactly. And so we had to sign in, you know, say, you know, and you know, you had to sign in for your comm badge. And if you didn't turn your comm badge in at the end of the day, you could run the risk of 1, getting fired, and 2, you wouldn't get paid for the day.
Stupid, not worth it.
Unless you turn your, you know, your communicator in. So, you know, you go through the rigmarole, you get your boots on, you put on your uniform, and then they'd send you off to hair and makeup. And most of the extras, they didn't really put much makeup on us. They would give us a little powder to keep down any glossy points. And then they would send us to hair, and they would do up our hair whichever way they felt they wanted to. And when I went to hair, I found where the hair and makeup trailer was, and I went in and I saw the appropriate people to do my makeup, and they just basically dusted me with a little bit of powder to take down all the shine of natural skin. And then I went over to go see the people in hair, and they did up my hair, and the person got out their clippers to work my sideburns, because a holdover from the original series with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy that they still continued to do on Next Gen. All the men, they would point their sideburns.
Yep.
They'd cut their sideburns at an angle, so they'd have that kind of distinctive little Star Trek wedge shape.
Yep.
Me being a big fanboy, of course,
you were like, ooh.
He cut mine that way.
They're like, hey, you're
I'll do
done.
it myself. I want to make sure they're perfect the way I want them.
Do we have any fans
and
here?
like,
you.
Why'd they send you to? Yeah. Yeah. So again, I got done there, and they tell me, okay, go ahead and report to stage. I think it was stage 9, and I go over to stage 9, and stage 9 is where the main bridge was, as well as the 10 forward lounge set, as well as the main set, which was Captain Picard's quarters, which would get redressed and become Riker's quarters, Troy's quarters.
Well, silly question. If the bridge is there, his ready room is there, right? Is that right?
Yeah, and that's a weird thing. The ready room is there as well. His ready room, his like little private office, is connected directly to the bridge set. But yet the observation lounge, which they would use like as their briefing room, was not. No, it was in the same room,
just
on
not
the same
connected.
Soundstage, just not connected for some weird. It was off to one side for some weird reason. I never was able to find out why, but they weren't connected.
Okay, so you're there. Do you know what episode your first episode was?
Yeah, my first episode I worked on was called The Nth Degree.
That was season.
It's a Barclay episode.
Oh.
Season 4.
Season 4, and then you had a broccoli episode.
And season 4.
That's for all you Star Trek fans out there.
Barclay.
I'm
Mr.
Barclay.
Barclay. We have to be nice. He is Mr. Barclay. You are. You want to douse him in cheese.
I loved broccoli. He was one of my favorite, side characters.
I did too.
Reg.
Too. Yeah. And Reg Barclay. Poor Reg. But so I go on stage, and again, it's very early. It's got to be like maybe 7 a.m. at this point, and people are just slowly filtering in, and I'm just standing around, just feeling it's all hell, because we, of course, going, I'm going to be on Star Trek, and the other part of it is like, I have to be professional. I can't let everybody find out that I'm an extra. So I'm just standing around nervously, and I noticed on one of the walls on the back side of a set piece, they had a wall set up between where the craft services table was, and then there was a solid wall, and then there was a hanging drape of black velvet, and then on the other side of that was the giant windows from 10 forward. Well, on the back of this wooden flat separating the velvet curtain and the craft surfaces table, there was a great big huge blueprint, which was a cross-sectional view of the Enterprise, showing you, and it was marked. It said, here's the bridge, here's the main shuttle bay, here's main engineering. And so people could get themselves acquainted with going, oh, I see that this set I'm looking at
is here on the ship,
supposed to be here on our imaginary on the imaginary ship. And I'm looking at it because I found it interesting. I already knew where all these places were, but I was just doing something to pass the time, and I could see out of the side of my eye this big shadow come up from behind me, and I turned around to look, and it was Jonathan Frakes, who played Will Riker on the show,
Number 1.
second in command on the ship. Yeah, and I looked over and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just keep quiet. And that's the easiest thing to do. And he smiled at me, and he put out his big old paw at me, and he said, hi, you must be new here. I'm Jonathan. And I nervously put up my hand and shook his hand. He goes, well, if there's anything, you need, just let me know.
I wonder how many times somebody goes back to him and says, hey, I need this.
Well, I think it's just generally just to be friendly. But
nice.
he walked about 2 steps away from me, stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't turn around, but he walked backwards the 2 steps back to me. And he gave me that Riker grin. He said, oh, and welcome aboard the Enterprise. And he walked off, and I was like, that was so nice. He didn't have to do that.
He did not.
He's like one of the main characters on the show.
Yeah.
He didn't have to be nice and sweet and kind like that to me. But that just showed you what a nice guy he was.
Yeah.
And really kind of prepared me for how nice the cast was. It was a real joy to get to work with them.
So, how do they prep you? Do they give you do they go as far to give you your character a name or something, ensign so and so, like they did for the
No. You are background
Okay.
actor number 5 or whatever, you know.
You never gave yourself a character name, Max? You telling me you didn't? Ensign Maxwell?
No. I never thought of that. That did kind of happen later. But that's a story for my time when I worked on Star Trek, the
Undiscovered Country. Yes, I remember that.
Which I'll talk about for another time. On set, it's the second assistant director's responsibility to basically wrangle the background actors, the extras,
right.
and they had a special room to one side that if we weren't going to be needed, we could go hang out there, and it was full of couches and chairs, and they called it the green room because it was painted green.
Good name.
Me, I found being on set fascinating. So if I wasn't being needed, and if I wanted to, I would just go find myself a box to sit on
and watch,
off to one side, so I wasn't being the way, and just watch. I loved watching how they set things up, how they did things. And even the design of the Enterprise was designed to facilitate filming and get shots done faster. If you go back and watch the show, you'll notice the ceiling of the bridge has these ribs and then all this white material. Well, that actual white material is fabric. It's not plastic. It's fabric. It's a special fabric they use in filming to diffuse light through. So they had a whole set of stage lights up beyond that hanging from the ceiling grid of the soundstage. And all the lighting is preset. And because of those nice little, those nice big white ceiling gauze-like fabric panels, it would diffuse the light really nicely. So they didn't have to spend a lot of time bringing in extra lights and bounce reflectors and all that sort of stuff. They would do it every once in a while, but not on the regular. And that made the filming process go so much faster. So you didn't have to worry about relighting.
You started in season 4, and did you finish one whole season?
I did. I was there for the whole rest of the 4th season. In preparation for this, I went back and rewatched a bunch of them, and I was surprised to actually find out there's actually a couple episodes that I'm not in, and
that you were there for.
You never know why you are or aren't.
Right.
No, yeah, that I was there for, and then things would get filmed and things don't get used and such. But I was there, and the very last episode of the 4th season was also happened to be the 100th episode of Next Generation film. And that was a big, big milestone for them, because the original series, Star Trek, only ran for 79 episodes, and that was 3 seasons. And here they are getting to 100 episodes at the end of their 4th season. And they did something really unusual. Of course, on set, time is money. We got to get this done as quickly as possible so that we don't go over budget and we get it done on time, because whatever time extra we take here takes away time from post-production, because they have a very strict timeline of this episode's got to be on X date. So we got to get this pushed along as quickly as possible. But on that 100th episode, they took a big break during the middle of the day, and they threw a big party on the bridge of the Enterprise, and all the cast and crew was there. They brought out this great big 100th episode cake, and Mr. Roddenberry was there, and he didn't come down to set all that often because, he was getting up in years and he had a little difficulty in moving and such, but it was great that he was there, and they put him in the captain's chair, and they took pictures, a big cast and crew picture with all the cast, and then they brought in the crew with Mr. Roddenberry sitting in the captain's chair all around and all of that sort of stuff. And all this partying is going on, and I'm just hanging out, minding my business, chatting with other people. But there's that deep little fanboy part of me having been watching Star Trek ever since I was a little kid, wanting to go over and talk with him.
Oh,
and finally, when there was a lull and everything going around and he was just sitting there by himself, I walked over and I introduced myself. I wasn't so bold as to put my hand out to shake it. I didn't know how far I could go with all these sorts of things, but I told him how much Star Trek had meant to me ever since I was a little
you
kid,
outed yourself as a fan
to Gene Roddenberry. Yes.
Not the production.
Not like I felt I didn't think that he would go around tattling on me.
Right.
And I also told him how I was a friend of Richard Arnold's, and he got a big grin on his face. He goes, "Oh yes, Richard's a great guy. He's been with me for many years." And I told him, "Well, I just wanted to thank you, Mr. Roddenberry, for Star Trek and what it's meant to me and how it's motivated my career." And I told him how I'd been working in the business all this time because I love making stuff. And the first things I ever made were things from Star Trek, and it was nice. It was very short, but it was super nice, and I'll always remember that.
That's
and
awesome.
I'll always cherish that little, because it's one thing getting to meet somebody at a convention,
right?
But they're there to meet you,
right?
This is that sort of a once in a chance meeting of getting to meet him in his environment, in his home, in his work, as it were.
Right.
So that was really wonderful. I really, really enjoyed that. And, that eventually had to end at some point. I think the party lasted about 2 hours, which is
obviously
really,
this was
really
at the end of the workday, right? Or did you guys have shooting to do?
No, that was the problem.
Were you guys doing this all in costume?
Yes, I was still in uniform at the time.
Don't they tell you not to eat in costume?
Yeah, that's also why they all handed us really, really big napkins,
to
make sure. I mean, we'd already taken lunch, and then after lunch we came back, and that's when they had the big deal with bringing out the cake.
Did they ever release any video or images of this 100th episode celebration? Did that ever get officially released?
I don't know. I think there was an on-set photographer taking pictures, but other than that, I don't remember there being any video cameras or anything, filming it, documenting it for posterity. No, I don't think so. I think there was probably a still photographer there, though. But that all had to end at some point, and we had to get back to work. And because of that, like the scene of me getting to play the transporter technician in
which one?
This episode.
Oh, okay.
It's in the fourth season finale. And it's Redemption Part 1.
Okay.
It's the episode, a brief synopsis. It's the episode where Worf has decided to leave the Federation and go fight in the Klingon Civil War.
Yep.
With his brother.
Yep.
And
I remember
supporting Galron.
Yep.
In the Klingon Civil War. And so we went to go film the scene of me being the transporter technician, and I was just blown away. It's like, I'm going to do what? You want me to do what? I'm not about to say no. I just had to steel myself for thinking about what am I going to do. And I still remember to this day that when I got my pay voucher for that day's work, it said on it, featured non-speaking part, which meant I got paid double for the day. Back then on Next Generation as non-union extras, we got paid about $80 a day, which isn't an awful lot. But when you think about the fact that they're feeding you and really all you have to do is stand around and do as they tell you to do, it's not an awful lot of hard work. And $80 a day is still better than nothing. Featured meaning I'm with two principal actors. It's just me and them. It was just me and Michael Dorn as Worf, and then the actor who played Galron. So it was just me and those two fellows. Yeah. And
you had to operate the transporter. Now,
again, this all goes back to...
Right? Did they tell you where to...
And nobody had told me...
Anything on how to operate the transporter?
No, nobody told me what... No. But again,
you and I know
being a fan, I'd watched everything, and I had watched people, of course, and I remembered seeing that there are 3 lit bars, and in some of the other earlier episodes, they made sure to show people putting their hands on these 3 lit bars, and as you would pass your hands up, the bars would light up underneath your hands.
Mhm.
And as you would pull your hands down,
Energize.
the bars would
Yep.
turn off. Yeah. Just like the original series, there was the 3 bars you would slide up to beam people away and pull down to beam people in. And so I just basically did that. But the addition to that is that as the scene plays, Worf and Galron come into the transporter room. Galron walks up and stands on the transporter pad. The two of them continue having a conversation, which is kind of on the edge of being an argument. And
Klingons.
Worf, and Worf kind of turns around and he gives me, the look, and he says, "Crewman, you're dismissed." And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, going, well, the transporter's like a gun. It's a very, very powerful, dangerous, in the wrong hands, piece of equipment. You wouldn't just leave it ready to fire.
No. Log out.
And so I thought, well, I'll just do this. And I just, tapped a few buttons and then I walked out and I did, and the doors opened on cue. And then the director calls cut and he goes, "Oh, good. That's great. Let's do it a couple more times just as backup. It's a short little shot."
Right.
And the director stopped and he said to me, he's like, "You, who told you to do that with your hands?" I said, oh my gosh, I'm trying to make up something really quick. I said, "Well, yeah." And I thought, well, I said to him, and I said that exactly to him. I said, the transporter's a really powerful piece of equipment. You wouldn't just leave it on, in case it's accidentally fired or whatever. And so my idea was that it should get put on pause and locking it out so it can't be used until somebody takes
control of
off.
takes control of the
Yeah. So and he goes, "Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. Make sure you do it exactly the same way every single time. No matter how many times you have to take this, no matter how many times these guys ruin a line or whatnot, you have to hit exactly the same buttons."
Tell me that got a laugh. Did that get a laugh?
Well, no, because it was really late and they just wanted to get it done. Again, because of the party held earlier in the day, everything about production got backed up.
Right.
When we filmed that scene in the transporter room, it was 10 o'clock at night, 10 p.m. on a Friday night. So they are going heavy into overtime already. So they're like, "No, we got to just move along, get this done, move along, get this done.
Move along.
They shot it 3 times and I did it exactly as I was told. I hit the same buttons every single shot and it went off without a hitch. There was no line flubs or anything, and they went ahead and did it. And then the last thing I remember we shot that day is the very last thing in the episode is seeing Worf leave the Enterprise and a large group of us, his crewmates, as well as the main cast, follow him to the transporter room. And so we extras formed an honor guard of 2 rows of us, on either side of the hallway that he was going to walk down.
Mm-hmm.
And I was standing around on set watching them set things up, and I was watching them practice with the camera dolly and how they were going to do this shot. The whole time the camera is backing away because Worf is in front of the camera. So the camera has to back up. The shot starts with the doors of the turbo lift open. Worf steps out and a couple of the other cast members are behind him. And then he walks down the hallway and the camera is backing up the whole time. And as the camera backs up, you start seeing all the rest of us, his crewmates, lining on either side of the hallways. And I was watching how the camera was going to do this and thinking ahead. I thought, I want to be exactly in this spot right here because I know that as the camera turns and slows down to turn to back up, I'll get seen more. I'll get seen better. And it's all about screen time, baby.
Did it work?
Oh, yes, it did. If you go and watch the episode, you can see me much better than the fleeting second and a half that you might have for most of the people, because indeed the camera had to slow down to make the turn. And because of that, you see me longer as then the camera backs into the transporter room and then cut. And that was the last thing we filmed that day. And again, we didn't get out of there until at least 11:30, which is just unheard of. They don't want to ever go that late on a TV show because that's a lot of overtime and that's a lot of money. And
wait a minute, if you guys work that late, does that overtime for the extras too, or I thought that was
It is.
Really?
It is. The extras get overtime as well. Everybody on set, no matter union or not, gets overtime. And that's partly to do with California state law as well.
All right.
So yeah, and that was the last thing for that season. But going back, there was an episode earlier during the 4th season where they were setting up lights. It was an episode called The Host. And it's the very first time we ever meet somebody who is a Trill, one of the joined species that we find out more about in Deep Space Nine, because, of course, in Deep Space Nine, one of the main cast members, played by Jerry Farrell, she is a Jadzia Dax, who is a joined creature.
Right.
There's a symbiotic creature that lives within the body. And
is that the one that where
the host,
Crusher falls in love with the
host member, who is
a male?
The host is in a man, and through some turn of events, he has a bad accident. He's there to negotiate a treaty between two warring groups of alien races. He's hurt and dies.
Well, the host dies.
To save the body, dies, and to save the symbiote, they have to take it out and insert it into someone else to have it live until another body can be sent out. And that host body was Riker.
Oh, well, temporarily, they're right?
Yeah, to use his body to keep it alive temporarily.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So they're getting ready to film something in Maine Medical. And I just love standing around and watching them, how they're doing something. And Whoopi Goldberg was going to be on this episode. And I love Whoopi Goldberg.
Yes,
she's hilarious. She's such a sweet lady. So I wanted to meet her. And so I knew if I wanted to be relaxed and have fun, I could have just gone back to the other soundstage and hung out and stayed in the green room. But I didn't want to, because I wanted to meet Whoopi, and I like watching them work, how they did everything. So I'm standing in the hallway, out of the way again, and the doors were open in Maine Medical, which is where they were doing all the works. That's why I could stay out there, out of the way. And I got to talking with this fellow who was Whoopi Goldberg's personal assistant. And I was admiring this shirt he was wearing. And we were talking about it, and he was telling me where he got it and that he really liked it and that it was new and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly this very delicate hand came in and grabbed my hand by the wrist and pulled it away from his shirt. And I turned around, and it's Whoopi Goldberg has just grabbed my hand, and she's looking very stern at me, and she's going, "Did I tell you you could touch his hand? Did I tell you you could touch his shirt? Did I? Well, young man, did I?" I'm like sheepishly, "No." She goes, "That's okay, darling. You go ahead and touch it. You go ahead and touch it. Go ahead. That's okay. Go ahead. If I didn't like you, I wouldn't mess with you. If I didn't like you, I just ignore you. But you seem to be having such a nice time talking with my assistant here. I just thought I'd come up and
give you a hard time.
Oh, yeah. 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 So she was a real sweetheart. She, again, instantly made me fall even into more love and be even bigger fan of Whoopi's from that. So that was just one of the many times that I just really, really just like, I am in hog's heaven getting to be here. There's so many fans out there who would have loved to have gotten to be here and have all these experiences and meet all these wonderful people. And I'm getting to be here. And again, all because of my wonderful friend, Richard Arnold. So
I feel like an idiot because, it's like, I knew you back then, and I was never watching the background actors. It wasn't until years and years later that I watched them, and I see you and I see Guy, because of the two people,
Guy Vardaman.
Yeah. The two people that I've met, I know now to look, but when it first aired, I wasn't, really wasn't looking at the background people, and had I, I'm sure I would have got quite a kick out of it. It was just so much coming at. There's so much story going on. You're like so riveted by the story.
Well, yeah. And again, you're supposed to focus on the main characters. Yeah. That's why, We're just there to make the place look lived in and filled out. So
I did have a friend that actually got a big role on that. It was that sort of that Romeo and Juliet episode where it was the gentleman who starred in The Rocketeer, and he was the kind of rogue whatever. And there was a girl.
Okay. I remember the name of that episode. I think that is a second season, maybe a third season. I think it's a second season episode, but I remember the title is The Outrageous Okona, and the actor Bruce Campbell. Not Bruce Campbell.
Bill Campbell.
Right. Was guest starring sort of as this sort of like Han Solo-esque like rogue.
Yes.
And yes, I remember that episode. And you said a friend of yours was in it? Who did he play?
He was the father of the daughter.
Oh, so the older guy who played her father.
His name is Douglas Rao. He was the artistic director of the Laguna Moulton Playhouse my entire life up until when he retired. And he was actually also friends with Harrison, believe it or not, Harrison Ford. Yeah, and at his retirement party at the Playhouse, Harrison couldn't be there, but he sent a video. And they played it on this.
Wow,
I was
nice.
like, whoa,
that's nice.
Yeah, it was a big deal for me. But anyways, that was a huge deal. It's like, that was one of those times where it wasn't the background person. So I could totally see, oh, that's Doug, and he had a big part on that. So that's one time I didn't have to look so hard to see somebody I knew.
Well, so that episode where I got to meet Whoopi was the host. And then the second episode I did was Half a Life, and Half a Life, the guest star was David Ogden Stiers, and
it's Bill Campbell.
Oh, is it Stiers?
Yeah, I'm looking up stuff here. Bill Campbell, David and Ogden Stiers,
and
that way we won't get comments.
Been a big star on MASH, for more than half of MASH's run, and he was guesting. He was playing a character who is a research scientist from another planet who has found possibly this new technique to help his people with some sort of technical thing to help the planet. And so the Enterprise has come here to facilitate his experiment and blah, blah, blah. And then he basically is told by his planet that you have to come home to die because you're getting to the right age, because their people do at a certain time, everybody
do a Logan's Run,
goes and has themselves. Yeah, they get themselves put down because, well, and their excuse is that so they won't be a burden on the rest of society and their family in their old age. And that was another episode which guested Majel Barrett as Luxana Troy.
Yeah.
And I got to meet him because that was the episode where Whoopi was coming in. She was coming in just for one day.
Right.
She had some scenes with somebody, and I got to meet David Ogden Stiers on set, and that was really nice. And what did I say wrong?
Stiers.
Oh, Stiers. David Ogden Stiers.
Stiers.
And Stiers. Which is it?
Stiers. I've always
Stiers to be the right way.
On Entertainment Tonight or whatever they say, David Ogden Stiers. I go off what the interview.
Okay, David Ogden Stiers. He was a really nice guy, and he was gay. Maybe something most people didn't think, and he hit on me. He wasn't overt. He wasn't. This wasn't any sort of Me Too moment. He was very polite and such and everything. I said, "Well, thank you very much, but I have a husband at home." And he said, "Oh, well, he must be very happy with you. Congratulations."
He didn't do anything.
But he was a really nice guy.
Ensign, you dropped your phaser.
No. There's none of that. He was very polite. He was very nice, and like I said, he just hit on me a little bit. And when I let it be known that I was very grateful for it, but that I have a husband, he was like, "Oh, that's very nice.
Oh, that's great.
He's very lucky and such." So, but yeah, so I all these little things, all because I had the opportunity given to me of getting to be an extra, all because of my dear friend who I will miss the rest of my life, Richard Arnold.
Well, that brings me back. That's a good point. Is during your time on all these episodes, how many episodes was it total? roughly?
Oh, I don't remember exactly the number. I think
maybe
we'll
list them on our website. We'll list.
I'll have to come up with a list of them. For the fourth season, there was at least, I think, 6 or 7 episodes, and then during the summer hiatus, that's when they filmed Star Trek: The Undiscovered Country, and I got used as an extra for that. And then when Star Trek came back for its 5th season, I did, I think, at least another 7 more episodes. But
so here's my question. So we can go over all that time, all those episodes. Did you ever get a chance to come across Richard Arnold? Did he ever come down to the set? Did you guys get to say hello to each other?
Oh yeah. He came down to set a couple of times. Yeah. And, near the end of my time, they also had a big ceremony on the Paramount lot, which I got to attend. No, I was not in uniform for it. So I got to be in my actual normal street clothes. Okay. They dedicated one of the buildings on the Paramount lot to Gene Roddenberry for all of his years of work and service to Paramount for Star Trek and everything. And they gave away a special little red pin to everybody who was there, and I still have that little pin to this day. Ooh. And of course, the building, there's a big brass plaque in front of it. It's the Gene Roddenberry building.
Oh, excellent. So, yeah, wow. I mean, it sounds like there is probably a gazillion stories there, but
there is, and that's why I thought maybe we could save the other half of these stories, like my time on Undiscovered Country, and for my other time on the 5th season of Next Generation for another episode.
That doesn't sound like a bad idea. I think this is a good place to wrap up for this month's episode. I love these stories. It's something I would wish that I could have been there. You know what I mean? It sounds like every fan's dream, and the fact that you had the incognito, you almost outed yourself so many times, man. You got so close to getting, but they weren't paying attention. You know, if they had somebody actually looking at it, they'd be like, "The guy's working the transporter correctly."
Yeah, but see, they wouldn't have known what was correct.
He's an amazing actor, or he's a fan.
The only people that would have known it was done correctly were all of my friends who worked in the art department who were not on set. So they're not going to give it up. They're not going to out me in that regard. Right. So it's one of those things where you just hide in plain sight. Yeah. Nobody will notice.
Yes. Well, you know what? I have a task for you then for our Facebook group page for Max Effects. Think about it. Let's come up with a name for your Next Generation character. We should name him.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
And okay. Maybe we'll come up with a backstory for him. Maybe his father was a Starfleet officer. I don't know. It could be fun. But let's start with the name. That'll be fun.
I know that one of my other co-workers, one of the other people who were as an extra on Next Gen, and she was there for a long time, though. She was there much, much longer than me.
As an extra?
And yeah, as an extra. And she got featured an awful lot. My buddies, John Champion over on another podcast, they actually gave her character a name, and they called her Lieutenant. Yeah. And
maybe our fans want to name you.
There you go. Yeah. And so I'll have to, yeah, that would be a good idea.
All right. So what we'll do, you come up with a name, what you think, and we'll see if we can get our people on our Facebook group to see what name they came up with and see which one jives. We'll see which one.
Right.
We'll put it out there, and then maybe we'll have people vote on them.
Just okay. Well, it doesn't make it official.
No, but it's
what the fans chose.
It's for us. Yes.
Yes, it's for us. It's for the fans.
Right.
It's just in fun. Just all fun.
But what an adventure, and what a bummer that there's no photographic. I mean, there's you on screen, but man, behind the scenes photos would have been so cool.
Well, somewhere in my vast archive of pictures, because yes, kids, back in the day when there was actual physical camera film pictures, I have a lot of boxes of pictures of my work as well as of myself. I did sneak a camera on set, and I did get. I took pictures.
You're being naughty.
With my own camera of myself, for the room in the engineering department in one of the main hallways, but I can't find the pictures. I do have a picture of myself on the bridge of the Starship Voyager from when I worked on Voyager as a prop maker. And that's because I was delivering things on set.
Right.
And I just went and sat in the captain's chair, and I handed my camera to one of the people there and say, would you mind getting a picture of me? And they're like, okay, whatever, click. And so I do have a picture of myself sitting in Captain Janeway's chair.
If you do find the next gen pictures, will they be of you in costume or in street clothes?
They will. They are of, I know, because they are of me in costume. So I'm in the gold and black uniform I wore for Next Generation.
And you're doing this with a small camera that had a timer on it. So there's nobody around. It's just you.
Yep.
Setting up these shots. Okay.
I had to take my bag. I had this gym bag that I carried stuff around, like a book and my regular clothes. And I tossed it on top of the transporter because, the transporter console in profile is a big wedge shape. Yeah. And so I did that, shifted the content so it would kind of like fill out either side of the wedge, and then placed my camera on top of the transporter console. And then I set the timer, and I looked to the viewfinder, make sure I'd be pointing in the right direction so I knew where to stand. And I purposely, had it set so it would be bigger, because better for it to be set out wide and see me
cropped
rather than to cut off part of me and cut off my head or something. And I just did it really quickly, and I ran up onto the transporter platform and took the picture. Luckily they were filming on the other soundstage that nobody was watching. The lights were on. Yeah, there was nobody there. Basically, all of the sets, all the main sets for Star Trek: The Next Generation were filmed on what is now Soundstage 8 and 9 at Paramount Studios. The main bridge, 10 forward, and the higher officers' quarters and hallway were on, I want to say, Soundstage 9. And then Soundstage 8 was where the main curved corridor was.
Oh, right.
As well as main medical, Dr. Crusher's office, the transporter room, the engineering department, and there was another sort of like multi-purpose set that was right across the hallway from the transporter room that would get dressed as whatever room they needed, whether it needed to be the children's school or whether it was Mr. Mott the barber's barber shop, or whether it was Deanna Troy's office or whatever, a science lab. They would redress that room to be whatever room they needed to be. And also on that same soundstage was the hangar base set, which also doubled for the holodeck.
Oh, really? So they could reconfigure the hangar into holodeck.
Yep, they just changed the walls.
What about where was main engineering again?
Main engineering was there on the same soundstage.
Okay, and what about the Jeffries tubes?
The Jeffries tubes were part of the same on that same stage where the main engineering was.
Would make sense because
and the interesting thing too about that is that the stage where all of these hallways and the transporter room and main medical and engineering had been used for Star Trek since 1978, all the way back to the time of the aborted Star Trek Phase 2 TV series, which then got canceled and became Star Trek The Motion Picture. So all of those sets had been used, that soundstage had been used for Star Trek since 78.
Wow. A lot of Starfleet lineage there.
Oh gosh, yes. All of the Star Trek sets for Star Trek The Motion Picture, Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home, all of those films were all filmed on that same soundstage.
Wrath of Khan, you mean Space Seed 2?
Yeah, they were all filmed there on those same sets. It's just that between the time of the motion picture era and then I believe Star Trek 4, after 4, I believe, is when they started filming Next Generation, or 5, I can't remember precisely. And then the movie sets got redressed and got changed, and they became the Next Generation sets. But if you go back and look at the Next Generation sets and compare them to the motion picture sets, especially the first and second motion picture, you can definitely see, oh, there's that shaped doorway. There's those bulkheads on the wall. I recognize all that stuff from Star Trek 1 and 2, which got redressed and reused as Next Generation.
Well, I know they use some of those Kirk era or movie era ships like the Pegasus, and they had to go on board those ships, and they had to have that similar look to those ships from that era.
Yeah.
So they must have kept some of the big chunks of those sets around, like reconfigure them for some of the stuff they used in Next Gen.
In set storage, yeah. If you go back and watch Star Trek the motion picture, the engineering set is actually 3 stories thick. The section that goes down below, 1 story below the ground floor, and they dug a pit and fully concreted it and everything. And then the set went up to a 3rd story, and then all the way up to the roof of the soundstage. At the very bottom where that pit was, though, they did a painting directly onto the concrete floor of the set to make the set look longer and bigger. And when I worked on Next Generation, I got to go down there, and sure enough, that painting was still there, painted on the floor. They never removed it during Next Generation. It was still there.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah. So those sound stages had been Trek all the way from the motion picture era to Next Generation. They got redressed and became the sets for the Voyager,
Sure.
And it was finally, after all that time, after Voyager, the sets got struck. And I'm not sure where the sets for Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise, were built. Because, Deep Space Nine was filmed on different sound stages nearby.
Well, this was all really good stuff. So I really enjoyed talking to you on this episode. Yeah, and I can't wait for everybody to hear about your adventures on the other side of the camera, your special hand props that you made for Next Generation.
Well, I can't wait to get into those stories, too, because my time behind the camera on Star Trek was much, much longer than my time in front of the camera as a background actor. Well, off the top of my head, one thing I think people really enjoy hearing the story about is the Klingon dagger, which we all named the Soul Taker, that I did for Deep Space Nine.
Ooh, yes.
Dun, dun, dun.
But for now, I think this is a good time to say ta-ta, farewell.
And once again, to wrap this all up, I just really want to thank my good friend Richard Arnold for all of this, because if it hadn't been for his kindness and his friendship to me, I would have never have gotten to have been on Star Trek as an extra, as a background actor. And I just want everybody to remember Richard fondly. So with that, good night.
So I want to let everybody know we will be back next month, and that we are part of the Skywalking Network, where you can find other great shows like classic Marvel Star Wars comics, Talking Apes, the Neverland Clubhouse, the Resilience Squadron podcast, and there's a new one that I think people will like called Totally Tell Me Everything. And let's not forget the flagship show, everybody. This is the big one, Skywalking Through Neverland. So please visit us on our Facebook group. That's the Max Effects Podcast Facebook group. We love to hear what you have to say about the shows. We love to see what you guys have to post about the shows. Please let us know anything that you want us to cover. We will also be trying to put some support material up for this particular show up there when Max finds his pictures. So we'll make sure that we get some more fun stuff to tie into this show. We're also going to try and get him to take some pictures of the, he's got the DVDs. We're trying to get some pictures of Max in the show up there so you can see Max on the Next Generation. With that, Max, I bid you adieu.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin. And until next month, I wish you adieu as well. And as we like to say, go boldly.
Yes, indeed.